Welcome to Midnight Whispers, where the night doesn't whisper, it warns. As you lie in the safety of your bed, imagine footsteps in the forest, eyes watching from behind the trees, and truths too terrifying to ignore. These aren't just stories, they're echoes from the shadows, real accounts whispered under breath by those who survived. So close your eyes, but don't fall asleep too fast. The darkness remembers. Imagine waking up to a wound you can't explain, told it was inflicted by a ghost. What if your dream home turned into a living nightmare, quietly boiling you alive? It was the summer of 2020, years after the nightmare ended, and I was sitting around a fire with my in-laws, listening to ghost stories. My wife, seizing the moment, turned to them with a mischievous glint in her eye and said, "He was stabbed by a ghost while he slept. Show them the scar." Their faces, naturally, turned to a mixture of confusion and disbelief. What was I about to show them? As I'd done dozens of times for friends, family, and the simply curious, I pulled aside my shirt. There it was, under my left pec, over my ribs a scar, unmistakable in its size and shape, a permanent, physical reminder of something truly inexplicable. A gasp, followed by the inevitable question, what happened? My answer, then as now, was always the same. Liberty Street. That scar, a mark from an unseen assailant, was just one chilling chapter in a story that quietly, insidiously, began to boil our lives alive. Our story, like many nightmares, began with a dream. It was 1994, and my parents, with two young children, myself, born in 2091, and my sister Rachel, born in 2092, were searching for a place to call our own. We'd been living in rentals, including one where our driveway literally became a SWAT team command post. We needed stability, a fresh start. We found Liberty Street, a two-bedroom house the owner was eager to shed. Its location, right behind the local elementary school my mother had attended, felt perfect. The neighborhood was quiet, bordered by thick woods, a single neighbor, and an old man who kept to himself. It seemed idyllic, a blank canvas for our new family. My grandfather, a master craftsman, was commissioned to expand and renovate it, transforming it into our forever home. Like a frog unknowingly placed in slowly heating water, we settled in, oblivious to the terrifying truth that Liberty Street would become our personal hell. The first year was deceptively quiet, but as the renovations began, around 2094 or 2095, the subtle signs emerged, dismissed at first as tricks of the mind or mundane occurrences. My parents, sleeping in the living room while their bedroom and kitchen were being built, were the first to truly experience it. My father, a famously heavy sleeper, remained oblivious, leaving my mother to face the nightly onslaught alone. Imagine trying to sleep as kitchen cabinets swung open and slammed shut, drawers clanged together with metallic shrieks, and unseen footsteps thumped across the floor, echoing from the newly renovated kitchen. Night after night, my mother would pull the blankets over her head, tears streaming, repeating the mantra she'd been taught since childhood. Ghosts don't exist. Ghosts don't exist. But the poltergeist activity persisted, a constant, low-level hum of unsettling nuisances that we constantly rationalized away. As children, Rachel and I quickly became accustomed to the unsettling atmosphere. The feeling of being watched was pervasive, especially in the dark. Every move felt observed, every quiet moment interrupted by an unseen presence. It fueled my childhood fear of monsters, compounded by a school bully's taunts, leading me to sleep with blankets suffocatingly pulled over my head, a habit that persisted until high school. Randomly, regardless of the season, Inexplicable cold spots would manifest pockets of frigid air that defied explanation, forcing me to sleep in a jacket even under layers of blankets. And then there was the smell. A strong, recurring scent of alcohol, like a dive bar had taken root in our living room. My parents didn't drink, not for religious reasons, yet the pervasive odor would appear out of nowhere, adding another layer of bizarre mystery to our seemingly normal lives with no discernible cause. Then, around 1996, the house introduced its first distinct character, the old woman. She wasn't threatening, not like the poltergeist. Her appearances were always silent. A graceful glide from the foot of my bed to the door, a fleeting glimpse of a pleasant, older woman, built like my mother. She'd appear, then vanish, leaving me confused, not terrified. My mother would dismiss it as my imagination, but years later, she'd confess she'd seen the old woman too, sometimes sitting in a rocking chair, a silent, loving presence, almost grandmotherly in her touch. Despite the growing list of bizarre incidents, the feeling of constant observation, the strange smells, the sudden cold, the unexplained noises, and now a silent, gliding figure our family clung to denial. Ghosts don't exist, was the party line. But Liberty Street didn't just affect us. Our friends began to experience its unsettling influence too. David, Eric, Timmy, they were all elementary school friends who would visit for sleepovers, only to refuse to return. Eric, my childhood nemesis, once spent a night with me in our basement, playing video games. The next morning, he was desperate to leave. "I heard things all night," he whispered wide-eyed. "People walking and talking upstairs, things moving." Even after I tried to rationalize it as my dad, he insisted it was after Dad went to sleep. After that, his invites were always declined, and his bullying, ironically, sometimes focused on Liberty Street. David, another friend, would eventually have a similar, terrifying experience that solidified his refusal to ever return. Timmy, too, experienced things that left him shaken, though he wouldn't speak of them directly until years later. It was clear the house had a disturbing effect on outsiders, hinting at deeper terrors yet to come. What began as minor annoyances and unsettling observations was gradually shifting. The frog was getting warmer. From the strange movements of our Nintendo remotes to toys turning on inexplicably, the line between mischief and malevolence was beginning to blur. There was the incident with my air purifier, a heavy circular device that was inexplicably launched across my room, unplugged, hitting my bed with a resounding thud. My parents rationalized it as merely falling, but the cord was unplugged, and the bins it sat on were untouched. Then there was the beloved penguin shirt pinned to my closet door that would visibly breathe, its chest heaving up and down as if an unseen person wore it. My mother would dismiss it as my imagination, blaming light from the blinds, but she later admitted she saw it too, lying to soothe me while privately terrified herself. The incidents were no longer just random. They felt more targeted, more intentional. The water was boiling, and Liberty Street was preparing its first truly direct attacks. From seemingly innocent quirks and unsettling observations to outright physical harm, our Liberty Street story was only just beginning to truly boil. Next, we uncover the hidden residence of our home, and the moment the line between mischief and malevolence was brutally crossed. What if the only member of your family immune to the haunting was your dog? Or so you thought. What if physical attacks defied explanation, leaving scars that lasted a lifetime? Our Liberty Street nightmare was no longer a slow boil. The heat was rapidly intensifying, moving beyond mere disturbances to direct, physical interactions and the chilling emergence of new, more malevolent entities. First, there was Brady, our fluffy Bichon Frise. A little sausage weighing a solid 25 pounds, too pudgy to jump higher than a couch. Yet, time and again, we'd find him mysteriously appearing in the basement. We'd put up gates, secured railings, even installed plexiglass coverings, making it physically impossible for him to slip through. Yet, without fail, the telltale barks would echo from below, and we'd find him at the bottom of the stairs, sometimes even dog urine and feces, despite him being secured upstairs. How was this possible? How could a dog so clearly contained defy the laws of physics? But the mystery deepened. Sometimes, Brady would be sound asleep upstairs, only for us to hear the unmistakable sounds of a second dog playing downstairs, disembodied barks, playful growls, and the rustling of unseen play. Imagine your own pet, seemingly playing tug-of-war with thin air, or the distinct sounds of a dog scrabbling under the couch, only to discover your actual dog is nowhere near. It was baffling, unsettling, and yet another piece of the growing puzzle. Then, the house introduced us to another resident, the soldier. Our family has a deep military tradition, and it seemed Liberty Street decided to honor it in the most terrifying way. It started subtly with my plastic military toys, not just rearranged, but meticulously reformed into old military files and columns from a bygone era, complete with my webgear pouches inexplicably shifted to the correct side for speed and comfort. What would you do if your childhood toys were rearranged into military formations by an unseen hand? Soon, the noises began. The heavy, rhythmic thud of combat boots echoing through the house, followed by disembodied military commands. "Wake up! Let's go!" would be shouted in a controlled yell from seemingly nowhere in the early mornings, or a random, sharp, "Hey you!" from an empty room. Fleeting glimpses of a slender figure in an old-fashioned uniform would appear in peripheral vision just for a second. Without giving too much away, this soldier, often seen with a wide-brimmed helmet and a gas mask obscuring his face, was a sergeant with the American Expeditionary Force, and his presence added a deeply unsettling historical menace to our home. The pranks and strange sightings had been unnerving, but they were about to give way to something far more sinister. The chilling escalation culminated in the first undeniable physical attack. It was a summer day, and I, a young child, was counting the 10 basement stairs, going up and down, when I reached the 4th step from the top. Suddenly, something grabbed my leg, locking it in place. Then, an invisible force gave me a forceful push to one side, spinning me around. I fell backward, sliding down every single stair, hitting my head against the wall at the bottom. My world went dark for what felt like an instant. When I came to, my mother and grandmother were screaming, rushing down to find me, sprawled at the base of the stairs. They rationalized it, of course, as an accidental trip, despite my frantic, childish attempts to explain that my feet stopped working, and something made my body keep going. This wasn't just a bump, this was an assault, a terrifying, undeniable shift from mischievous activity to genuinely dangerous, malevolent force. How would you react if your own home physically attacked you? From that moment on, the attacks became more frequent, more personal, and far more invasive. Glowing green eyes, disembodied and menacing, would appear in various rooms at night, on bookshelves, walls, or hovering near my old penguin shirt. My mother would dismiss my calls, claiming nothing was there, only to later confess she was seeing them too, equally terrified. Random lights throughout the house would activate or deactivate, every single light on, even when we'd meticulously turned them off before leaving for a drive, or lights flickering off in a room we were actively occupying. My parents would rationalize it as a loose switch or a forgotten knob, but the sheer frequency defied logic. Most disturbing was the unsettling mimicry of family members' voices. "Hello, sunshine," my mother heard, clear as day, a greeting from her own mother, only to find no one had entered the house and Rachel and I were in the basement. Imagine the chilling realization that the entities weren't just observing, they were mocking, invading, sowing discord by turning family members' words against each other. No room felt safe. The constant, escalating activity, and especially my father's steadfast disbelief, despite overwhelming evidence, he claimed nothing ever happened to him, drove a deep wedge within our family. My mother, Rachel, and I were living a different reality from him. In response to this pervasive fear, we adopted crude survival strategies. On drill weekends, when my father was away, we'd barricade ourselves in the master bedroom, the only room that offered a fleeting sense of peace. We'd bring snacks, drinks, and only leave for the bathroom, huddling together against the chaos that reigned beyond the threshold. The contrast was stark. Within that room, a fragile calm. Outside, pure terror. Can you imagine living like that, prisoners in your own home? But nothing prepared us for the brutal reality that a ghost could inflict physical harm, a wound that would become a permanent, undeniable scar. I was about 9, and during one cold winter night, I awoke to a sharp, unexplained pain in my chest. Thinking nothing of it, I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, my mother and grandmother were livid. A patch of blood stained my white long underwear, and on my chest, a relatively deep puncture wound. There were no sharp objects in my bed. I hadn't moved all night, and all our knives were accounted for. Years later, a shocking revelation confirmed our fears. When I purchased an M1 Garand and its original M1 bayonet in 2018, I realized something chilling. Bayonets, unlike common knives, were issued dull, designed for thrusting through bone. When I held the M1 bayonet to my chest, its dull, wider blade perfectly matched the unique shape and size of the scar, a wound that had festered for weeks, bled constantly, and left an undeniable mark. This wasn't just a bump in the night, this was an assault. If I had to assign blame, it would be the soldier. This incident, initially gaslighted away as a fingernail scratch or watch band rub, forced us to confront the horrifying possibility that ghosts could indeed inflict physical harm, and our "ghosts can't hurt you" mantra was a dangerous, life-threatening lie. The physical attacks and unsettling revelations forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth we had long denied. But acknowledging the problem was just the first step. It was only after we started hunting that the true master of Liberty Street would finally reveal himself. What if everything you thought you knew about ghosts was a lie? This is the moment we stopped denying, and the true terror, led by a menacing shadow, finally revealed itself. For years, my mother had clung to a single comforting fallacy: ghosts don't exist. It was a shield, a mantra against the growing anomalies in our home. But it was a shield about to shatter. We, her children, were, in our own innocent way, about to become the architects of its destruction. You see, after a particularly snowy December day, my sister Rachel and I, brimming with the boundless energy of children stuck indoors, decided to finally catch Santa's little helpers in the act. Our parents, clever in their attempts to rationalize the incessant noises and moving objects, had told us elves were behind it all. So, armed with a vintage boombox capable of recording, an old video camera, and stacks of paper for notes, we embarked on what we charmingly called elf hunting. It was a game, a snipe hunt that our parents, particularly our dad, heartily encouraged, thinking it would keep us occupied and out of their hair. They never imagined we'd actually catch anything. Our first real breakthrough came when we decided to set up the boombox in the basement. the nerve center of so much inexplicable activity. To ensure there were no human contaminations, Mom, Rachel, Brady, the dog, and I locked ourselves in the master bedroom, the only room not directly above the basement. For a full half hour, we sat in silence, waiting. What we expected was 30 minutes of dead air. What we got was something far more chilling. As we rewound the tape, around 10 minutes in, we heard it. Soft, distinct talking. A conversation between two individuals, their voices a slightly higher pitch, yet indistinguishable. Then, laughter. A few minutes later, more voices. Closer this time, as if right next to the microphone. Rachel and I were ecstatic. We had caught the elves. My mother, however, wasn't pockened. Her face, as she listened, drained of color. We had provided her with the irrefutable evidence she'd long denied, and the forced smile she wore as she sent us back to play could not hide the profound unease now etched upon her features. We continued our hunts with newfound zeal, capturing more muffled conversations, glimpses of doors opening and closing on their own, and even toys seemingly playing by themselves on video. One particularly unsettling clip showed the doorknob to the patio turning, the door slowly creaking open, and then my mom and dad peeking around the corner, confused. They assumed we'd done it, or perhaps Brady had, despite the impossible fact that he couldn't turn doorknobs and certainly wasn't small enough to squeeze through the gap. We knew the truth, and the mounting evidence was becoming impossible for even the most determined skeptic to ignore. We were no longer just elf hunting. We were documenting the undeniable presence of something otherworldly. This mounting evidence led to the inevitable. The talk. In any 12-step program, the first step is admitting you have a problem. For years, our family had been stuck in a perpetual state of denial. Each bizarre incident met with another convenient rationalization. It's nothing. You're just imagining it. It's a guardian angel. It's Santa's elves. But the weight of collective experience, the unexplainable audio recordings, the video footage, and the growing frequency of physical manifestations began to crack that carefully constructed facade. I was around 11 years old, and the concept of ghosts was becoming more prevalent in school. Whispered among friends, shared in library books. Everything pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Liberty Street was haunted. I distinctly remember pulling my mom aside, recounting the latest inexplicable incident, feeling an electric current, and seeing the blob move just feet behind me, even though Brady, our dog, was still crated outside. No, it wasn't an earthquake. No, Brady wasn't out of his crate. My mother, visibly struggling, finally broke. She admitted it. She had experienced similar things too. She had seen the green eyes, heard the phantom footsteps, and felt the same pervasive fear that haunted Rachel and me. The dam had broken. We finally admitted that something was wrong, that something was living alongside us. But this breakthrough, this reluctant admission, didn't bring peace. Instead, it brought a new, chilling mantra. Ghosts can't hurt you. It was a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, a fragile belief that while our house was indeed haunted, the entities were merely mischievous, incapable of true harm. Oh, how quickly Liberty Street would make us eat those words. Because with our admission, with the final piece of the denial puzzle falling away, the true architect of our terror would finally reveal himself. Every good horror story has a final boss, and Liberty Street, it seemed, was ready to roll out its biggest, most terrifying threat. We eventually christened him Cousin It, a name that belied the sheer terror he invoked. Unlike the fleeting glimpses of the old woman or the blob, Cousin It was a terrifyingly dark, distinct shadow figure. His appearances weren't out of the corner of your eye. They were direct, ominous presences. He was darkest still, even in the blackest room, a palpable void that moved with an independent, almost calculating intelligence. He felt like the ringleader, the orchestrator behind the escalating chaos. And with his arrival, the physical manifestations intensified dramatically, brutally challenging our naive belief that ghosts can't hurt you. His first public appearance came one terrifying night when Rachel, leaving her room for the bathroom, was drawn to the living room. As she stood in the hallway, she saw it a darkness deeper than night, almost glowing. Then she heard laughter, a low, guttural chuckle that sent her screaming back to her room, where she remained terrified for the rest of the night. Not long after, Cousin It became a frequent chilling sight. We'd see second shadows moving independently alongside us, pockets of visible darkness taking over parts of a room, the stark, featureless outline of a person. And with his presence, the attacks escalated beyond mere nuisance. What began as minor taps on the shoulder or gentle tugs on clothing quickly morphed into something far more malevolent: scratches, bruises, cuts, and violent slaps appearing overnight, often without us ever waking up. These weren't accidental. They were intentional, personal, and profoundly unsettling. My mother, previously mostly immune to physical contact, had her own terrifying experience. As she stood at the bathroom sink, two invisible hands pressed hard against her back, pushing her with such force that she was physically propelled forward. The unexpected power behind it left her shaken to her core, a stark reminder that even she wasn't safe. Then there was the chilling discovery of a large, welted, bruised handprint on Rachel's back. When asked, she had no idea how it got there, underscoring the sinister nature of these silent, overnight assaults. Even our meticulously clean mirror doors on my parents' closet, a frequent point of contention if we ever touched them, would be covered in handprints of various heights daily, despite Mom cleaning them off repeatedly. It was a constant violation, a silent declaration that no surface, no space, was off limits. The entity's deliberate manipulation of objects further highlighted their targeted and aggressive nature. Remember the innocent toys coming to life in movies? At Liberty Street, it was a horror show. Our Boo doll from Monsters, Inc., a beloved possession of Rachel's, began to activate spontaneously. It would cycle through its phrases, "Boo," "Kitty," and then sing its little tune, even when the batteries had been removed. Rachel screamed. Our parents removed the batteries, only for the doll to start singing its tune again the moment they left the room. The doll was, needless to say, swiftly disposed of. Then there were the family photos. We had always had them on walls and tables, but in these later years, they became instruments of psychological torment. You'd walk into a room only to find your own picture or someone else's, pulled from its place, sometimes crooked, sometimes fallen, but often placed deliberately in the center of the room, facing you as you entered, a silent, menacing message. Mom and Rachel once walked into the living room, only for their pictures to not just fall, but to fly, with tremendous force towards them, landing in the middle of the room as if thrown by an unseen hand. No other pictures were affected. The feeling of dread, the question of, why my photo? What's going to happen to me? Became a constant companion. And the disappearances, once rare, became a regular, violating occurrence. While minor items like water guns and Lego creations would vanish only to reappear in unexpected places, the most expensive and heartbreaking loss was Rachel's brand new Adidas jacket. It vanished within hours of us bringing it home from a back-to-school shopping trip. We searched every nook and cranny during the packing process, but it was never seen again. Rachel, feeling utterly targeted, has refused to wear anything Adidas since. The collective understanding that ghosts can't hurt you was a dangerous lie. cemented by these increasingly personal, intentional, and terrifying incidents. The frog in the pot was now boiling, and the water was scalding. With physical harm now a chilling reality, our only option seemed to be escape. But leaving Liberty Street was just the beginning of our fight. The house clung to us, forcing us to dig deeper into its unsettling past and endure its final, most devastating attacks. We ran, but could we truly escape? Discover the shocking history buried beneath Liberty Street, and the incident that finally broke our resolve to live there, forcing us to make an impossible choice. The air in Liberty Street had been thickening for months, but nothing could have prepared us for what came next. October bled into November, and with it, what we now call Hell Week descended upon us. It was a relentless siege, a full frontal assault on our senses and our sanity. The chaos that had once been sporadic became a constant, suffocating blanket. Every night, no matter how exhausted we were jolted awake by a primal fear. It wasn't just noises anymore. It was pure, unadulterated terror. The entire house seemed to hum with malevolent energy, escalating to a crescendo of fear. One evening, after a tense dinner, we heard a simultaneous crash, groan, and clatter from every single room in the house. This was the largest poltergeist incident we ever witnessed. In the kitchen, spice jars flew off shelves, shattering against the tile. Secured remotes in the den tumbled out of their baskets. And downstairs, in the back room of the basement, toy boxes overturned with violent thuds, their contents spilling across the floor. There was no tremor, no logical explanation, just a sudden, synchronized cacophony of destruction. It was as if an unseen conductor had orchestrated a symphony of chaos, playing every instrument at once. We stared at each other, speechless, the anger and frustration from sleepless nights finally boiling over into raw, helpless fear. And then the piano, our old electric keyboard, which had long since given up its battery-operated ghost and only worked when plugged in, and barely then, now played on its own. We'd moved it into the back room of the basement because it was broken, forgotten. Yet, one evening, as we sat in the living room, trying to force ourselves into some semblance of normalcy, a haunting, full melody drifted up from the depths of the house. Not just a few notes, but an entire, complex tune. My mother, Rachel, and I, frozen with terror, crept towards the basement stairs, the music growing louder with every step. My father, ever the skeptic, still heard nothing. "I don't hear a thing," he'd insist, his denial a constant source of friction, even as the notes echoed around us, sharp and clear. The wedge Liberty Street drove between us grew deeper with every passing, terrifying moment. When we finally reached the back room door, the music was almost deafening, seeping through the wood. The three of us stood there, our hearts pounding, and as our fingers brushed the cold metal of the doorknob, it stopped. Utter silence. The room was empty. Everything untouched. We knew then that this entity was playing with us, toying with our minds, reveling in our fear. The physical attacks escalated to an unbearable degree during Hell Week. Constant slaps, burning sensations, and angry red welts appeared on our bodies, often overnight. We'd wake up to a stinging pain, only to find a clear handprint or an angry bruise on our skin. There was no pattern, no warning. One moment, we were going about our day. The next, a phantom hand would land with a painful sting. Sleep offered no escape. A blissful slumber could turn into a sharp, burning sensation that wouldn't fade for minutes, leaving a telltale mark. One particularly brutal night, I woke to a sting, sat up in bed, and then felt a violent slap across my face. It was so loud, my head snapped to the side. It woke everyone. As they watched, horrified, the attacks continued. A pinch on my back was followed by another slap. then another. It didn't stop. I remember Rachel feeling something at one point and beginning to cry. I was crying too, tears of sheer terror and exhaustion. My parents were frustrated, overwhelmed. My dad, finally losing his composure, blew his lid. He yelled at us. He yelled at the house. He yelled at everything. My mom yelled back, equally frustrated at him and the house. We didn't know what to do. Desperate, we called my grandparents, and they offered immediate refuge. We packed a change of clothes, grabbed our school bags, and piled into the van, leaving as quickly as our fear would allow. As my parents argued inside, trying to get their affairs in order, Rachel and I, already in our seats, saw him. Cousin It, a towering, distinct shadow figure, stood on the hood of the van, dark against the night. He slowly, deliberately, walked around the van, his silhouette clear and ominous, an impossible, chilling manifestation of the pervasive evil we were trying to flee. We screamed, tears streaming down our faces, our terror echoing in the confined space of the vehicle. For several minutes, he shadowed us, a silent, menacing presence, until my parents opened the garage door, and he vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared. We drove to my grandparents' house in a shaken, eerie silence. Our world irrevocably changed. No place in Liberty Street had been safe, and now it felt like nowhere was truly safe from its reach. We couldn't just abandon Liberty Street entirely. School and our daily lives were tied to it. So, we entered a strange, unsettling period of living two lives. By day, we'd brave Liberty Street for school and essential chores, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. But as soon as dusk painted the sky, we'd flee to my grandparents' guest house, refusing to sleep a single night under that haunted roof. My father, who still hadn't experienced anything directly, remained stubbornly skeptical, often staying at the house alone, oblivious to the constant hum of unseen energy. This precarious existence highlighted our deep-seated fear and the growing friction within the family. We constantly questioned, how long could we maintain this charade? The emotional toll was immense. Every trip back to Liberty Street felt like walking into a psychological cage, our anxieties rising with each approach. We were no longer owners. We were trespassers in our own home, constantly looking over our shoulders. We knew we needed answers, an explanation, anything to make sense of the madness that had consumed our lives. One weekday, with Rachel at school and Dad at work, my mother and I embarked on a desperate quest to the county clerk's office. The county office was a 40-minute drive, but we were determined. Our knowledge of the house's history was minimal. It was moved onto the property in the mid-62nd, and the previous owner was suspiciously eager to be rid of it, never looking back. We figured this would be a good start. We spent hours sifting through dusty property records, tracing the house's lineage backward. We found its original location and confirmed its move in the 1962nd. But then, we hit a wall. A baffling, infuriating 40-year gap. Records from 1926 to the early 1962nd simply did not exist. It was as if the house had vanished from history itself, swallowed by an unknown past. The mystery deepened, a gaping void in its timeline, hinting at a dark, untold history that perhaps explained the pervasive, recurring smell of alcohol we'd often noticed, which we now theorized might be connected to an old bar near its original location. We left with more questions than answers, a chilling realization that the house held secrets far older and deeper than we could have imagined. What untold horrors were buried within its very foundations? And would we ever truly know? The Living Two Lives charade lasted for a few weeks, each day a test of our eroding sanity. The ultimate tipping point arrived one bored, dreary weekend. My mother and father were in the front office, Rachel in the living room reading, and I had locked myself in the den, doors bolted behind me. I was playing with a ball of silly putty. Then, after a little while, I put it back into its egg-shaped container and placed it in the desk drawer, locking the drawer securely. I was amusing myself, playing darts with mechanical pencil lead, when suddenly a sharp, piercing scream tore through the house. It was Rachel. I rushed out to the living room, finding her and my parents staring in confused horror. On the floor, near the couch, was the ball of silly putty. Rachel had a distinct, angry bruise on her back. "Where did this come from?" my parents asked, bewildered. I insisted mine was locked away. To prove it, I went back to the den, pulling open the desk drawer. The egg was empty. The silly putty that had just struck Rachel, with enough force to leave a bruise, had come from a container that was shut, in a drawer that was locked, in a room that was locked, in a hall that was locked. It was an undeniable, impossible violation, an act of pure, targeted malice. This was it, the final, brutal straw. We immediately dropped everything and left. We would never spend another full day under that roof. Our daily visits ended. From that moment, our only interactions with Liberty Street would be to retrieve mail and nothing more. Our decision to sell was clear, but the challenge remained. How do you sell a house that doesn't want to be sold? My mother contacted Chris, a new, eager realtor. "Chris," she told him bluntly, "it's haunted." He laughed it off, a young skeptic with dozens of supposedly haunted houses under his belt. "I've sold dozens of houses, had many people tell me their house is haunted, and I've yet to actually have something happen. I don't believe in ghosts," he declared, his confidence brimming. Days later, he held his first open house. He lasted half an hour. When we asked him how it went, his face was pale, his voice tight with residual fear. He confessed, "I will never step foot in that house again unless someone's in there with me." You were right. There is something in that house. He recounted an experience eerily similar to what David Johns and I had endured in the basement years earlier. As he waited alone in the patio for potential buyers, he began to hear footsteps, doors opening, coming from inside the house. He cautiously entered to greet the unseen visitors, only to find the kitchen empty. Yet, he could hear footsteps and things being opened coming from right in front of his eyes. The problem was there was no one there. He stood paralyzed in fear and confusion as he realized he was not alone, and that the footsteps were coming right towards him. Before they reached him, they ceased. He immediately locked the doors and fled. Chris, the staunch skeptic, was now a true believer. The house, in its malevolent way, had sealed its own fate. It was going to be sold. As we slowly began the arduous process of packing, an unexpected and ultimately tragic development occurred. In the summer of 2004, a friend of Rachel's, Tommy Hodges, a good-natured, curious kid, joined us for some ghost hunts. He owned a Ouija board, a controversial item that many dismissed as a mere toy. But for us, after all we'd endured, we were desperate for answers, desperate to understand. Armed with our camcorder, tape recorder, and other basic gear, my mother, Rachel, Tommy, and I ventured back into Liberty Street. The house felt off, as always, but we ignored it, setting up the Ouija board on a still-standing table. As the planchette began to move, answers flowed. Information only my mother and I knew, like the old bar near the house's original location, confirmed our suspicions. We even got a name, Ursula. Then, Tommy felt something touch his shoulder. He brushed it off, thinking it was a cobweb. A minute later, it happened again. Stronger this time. The board went silent. We moved to the basement, continuing the session. The footage we reviewed later was chilling. the lamp at the end of the table behind Tommy began to shake. Then the entire table moved slightly as he felt the touches. But the second session, the next day, was far worse. The house's activity intensified, noises echoing from every corner. The messages from the board turned dark, violent, speaking of murder, of harming us, of constant touching. Tommy was beside himself with fear as the attacks on him became more frequent, his eyes wide with terror. At one point, the letters on the board jumbled, then ceased entirely. We closed the session, leaving the house in near tears. Tommy, usually jovial, was utterly terrified, silent on the drive home. My father, furious at the risks we'd taken and the potential jeopardization of selling the home, demanded the board and all related materials be destroyed. We burned it all on a barbecue grill at the local park. Videotapes, notes, the board itself. It was a desperate, symbolic act to sever ties with the malicious forces that had infiltrated our lives. A final, futile attempt to escape their grasp. Tommy, though he remained our friend for a few more months, was never the same. He looked at us with a haunted, accusatory gaze, as if we had dragged him into an abyss from which he could never truly escape. We were entering the final phase of our nightmare at Liberty Street, and the house had one last, devastating betrayal in store for us. Could we finally prove what hunted us? Witness our last desperate stand against the entities of Liberty Street and the indelible scars, both seen and unseen, they left behind. After weeks of living a fractured existence days at Liberty Street, nights at Grandma's, the agonizing Two Lives game was finally coming to an end. It was early November 2004. Dad's deployment loomed, and the time had come for the final, brutal act of packing. Most of our lives were already moved into the guest house, leaving only the master bedroom closet, the basement's back room, and the attic. It was in that attic, a space overflowing with Christmas cheer and dusty memories, that Liberty Street delivered its final, malicious blow. We were a human chain. I crawled through the dusty rafters, handing boxes to Mom, who then passed them to Rachel and Dad on the landing. We were looking for one thing: Rachel's Adidas jacket, the one that had vanished just hours after she got it. But what we found instead was a stark reminder of the house's dark will. We were almost done, just a few boxes left, when a nondescript vase, a forgotten trinket, began to slide. It wasn't a gentle nudge, but a deliberate, accelerating glide across the attic floor. Mom and I watched in horror as it tipped, then plummeted, not randomly, but with chilling precision, straight towards Rachel's head. Mom's scream tore through the silence as the vase, defying physics, landed upright inches from Rachel, as if placed there with grim intent. Dad, rushing in, saw our fear. His face, usually a mask of stoic disbelief, finally cracked. "Let's just finish up and get out of here," he declared, his voice tight with a newfound, terrifying conviction. "I'm done with this." Just like that, Liberty Street was empty. Not a single belonging remained. It was over. Physically, anyway. The psychological battle, however, was just beginning. It was around this time that a new phenomenon captivated our screens: ghost hunting shows. Ghost hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel wasn't just entertainment. It was a revelation. Their techniques and technology were light years beyond James Dee's simple guide. EMF meters replaced my compass. Night vision cameras negated the need for flashlights, and their theories expanded our understanding. Armed with this newfound knowledge and my grandparents' old 35mm camera, Mom and I embarked on our final, desperate hunts. Rachel, exhausted by the ordeal, mostly sat them out. We returned to Liberty Street, now an empty shell, with a new purpose: to gather definitive proof. We set up tape recorders for EVP sessions, wandered through vacant rooms, cameras poised. In one chilling instance, as we walked away from the recorder to set up a camcorder, a single guttural word materialized on the tape. "Bitch?" It was an angry, growling voice, a direct, undeniable insult. We caught other voices, disembodied laughter, echoes of our earliest torment. Then, the impossible happened. Rachel joined us for one last hunt, and as I watched through the camcorder, the elusive Cousin It, our menacing shadow figure, materialized. I captured him on film, walking away, his form a consuming darkness, before he vanished into the patio corner. It was a fleeting, emotional victory, the only time we ever truly captured him. Our holy grail moment came with the 35mm camera. My last shot, an inexplicable urge to photograph the empty kitchen, yielded the most astounding image. There, in full color, stood the soldier. His web gear visible, sergeant chevrons clear on his arm, his face obscured by the chilling gas mask. And beside him, the little white dog, a black nose and eyes distinct, a tangible confirmation of our tormentors. It was undeniable. We had been haunted. The pieces of the puzzle, however, were still scattered. Our search for the house's missing property records the baffling 40-year gap from 1926 remained unresolved. But then, a serendipitous discovery in a local cemetery. A headstone bearing the name Ursula. It was an older woman, yet the connection felt undeniable, adding a tragic historical layer to the elusive entity that had tormented us with her appearances. We left Liberty Street for the last time to pick up my ghost hunting briefcase, filled with tapes, photos, and notes our collected evidence. But as we opened it on the bar counter, a final, cruel twist. It was almost empty. Only the tape recorder, compass, and my red maglite remained. The Holy Grail photo, along with most of our tangible proof, was gone. It was a bittersweet, inexplicable loss. Yet somehow, it cemented the house's lasting power, its ability to hold on to its secrets. The final sale of Liberty Street in January 2006 marked the end of our physical torment. But the emotional and psychological scars remained, a persistent echo of the nightmare. Rachel and Timmy, for instance, rarely speak of it. For them, it remains a deep-seated trauma, a chapter they prefer to keep closed. I, myself, developed quirks. I couldn't sleep without a nightlight until college, and the low battery beep of a smoke detector still sends shivers down my spine. When house hunting with my wife, old homes were off limits, and for any we considered, an EMF detector was always on hand. Yet, despite the fear and the lingering unease, I look back with a strange fondness. Liberty Street, for all its terror, indelibly shaped me. The thrill of the hunt, the pursuit of the unseen, directly influenced my career path. I sometimes wonder about the new owners, the ones who replaced us. Have they experienced the inexplicable cold spots, the disembodied voices, the unsettling feeling of being watched? Has the house gone dormant, its malevolent residents finally at peace? Or is it merely waiting, like a frog in a slowly boiling pot, for its next unsuspecting family to arrive, ready to begin the cycle anew? If you're still awake, thank you for braving the dark with us tonight on Midnight Whispers. If these stories stirred something in you, a chill, a memory, a shadow, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true horrors, and ring the bell so you never miss a whisper from the night. Sleep tight, if you can.